All right, welcome to the course. My name is John Elder from Codemy.com, and I'll be your instructor today. In this course, I'm going to teach you how to use MySQL, the database, with Python. So MySQL is an open source database. It's been around forever. It powers things like WordPress and just way too many websites to even name. It's one of the older databases that's been around for a long time. And part of its popularity is that it's free. It's open source. Anybody can use it. But also, it's really kind of fun and easy to use. So in this course, I'm going to teach you all about MySQL, the database itself, but mostly we're going to focus on how to connect Python to MySQL. And there's just tons of reasons why you would want to do that. You know, if you're doing big data stuff where you need to access a database through your Python script, if you're doing machine learning, things like that, or if you just have a website that needs to access a database and you're using Python as your programming language, this will help you too. So you don't really need any prior knowledge to take this course. You certainly don't need to know anything about databases or MySQL. A little bit of Python, if you already know some Python, is probably good, but you don't necessarily have to know it. I'm going to walk you through everything. And in the next couple of videos, we're going to install Python and MySQL and all the tools that we need, and I'll walk you through everything you need to know. So I should note, I'm on a Windows computer. If you're on a Windows computer too, that's great. If you're on a Mac or a Linux, you should be able to follow along. All the tools that we use are available on Mac and Linux, as well as Windows. Some of the commands may be slightly different here and there. I'll try and point those out when we get to those areas, but for the most part, you should be okay. So in the next couple of videos, we're going to start downloading all the tools we need. Before we do that, I want to spend a few minutes in the next video just talking about sort of what a database is, just to give you sort of an idea of what we're talking about, just a broad sort of overview in order to, so you have sort of a solid picture in your mind of what a database is, how it works. I find that if you just understand the broad overview of the thing, it makes using it a lot easier. So if you have absolutely no experience with databases, the next video will be good for you. But yeah, so that's the course. One more thing, if you have questions along the way, be sure and ask them. I'm here all day, every day answering questions. I enjoy doing that a lot. So that's totally cool. If you have questions anywhere along the course, there are no stupid questions. I get all kinds of questions, and I'm happy to answer them all. So my name is John Elder, and let's get started. Okay, before we get into downloading and installing all the tools that we're going to need, I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about sort of broad overviews of what databases are. So I find that a lot of people have a hard time understanding or even sort of visualizing what a database is. So, you know, there are these weird things. They exist usually up in the cloud. You put data in, you take data out, but what do they look like? How do they actually work? So if you're a little bit confused, if you just don't know, think of a database as a spreadsheet. And I've got Excel, you know, the famous Microsoft spreadsheet software up right now. And databases are basically just big fancy spreadsheets. They have columns, these things that go up and down. They have rows, things that go across. You can put, you know, things in and take things out. You can put all kinds of different things in, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But that's really pretty much all there is to it. You know, all databases pretty much work the same way. They sort of all act like this. So here, let's talk about this a little bit. You have going across, these are called rows in sort of spreadsheet terms. In database terms, they're called records. Same thing, record, row. Everything in a row, in a record, goes together. So, you know, you see here we have John Elder, me at me.com, my phone number, 10 West Elm, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89111, I don't know, 40. So this is a row, right? All of this stuff goes with me, right? If we then have another entry, we might have Mary Smith. Oops, let's do it. Mary Smith. Weird formatting here. Let me change that real quick. There you go. Let's go Mary at Mary.com. Her phone number is 222-333-4444. She lives at 11 Maple Street. I don't know. Chicago, Illinois, 60610. She is 23, right? Let me clean this up a bit. Okay, so, you know, we have another record in another row, and everything in this row goes with Mary. So everything in a row goes together, sort of keep that in mind. On the other hand, columns, they don't go together, but they're all of the same type of data, or the same data type, right? We'll talk about data types in a little bit, but like for instance here, age. Everything in this column is going to be an age. You wouldn't put, blue. That doesn't make any sense. Blue is not an age. Blue is not a number, right? Everything else in this column is a number. In this column, everything is a number, zip codes. In this column, everything is a state, right? So everything in a column has to be of the same data type. They're not necessarily, they don't belong to the same person. Like, this age goes with this record. This age goes with this record. They don't both go to John, but they're of the same type. So that's about it, really. So when you think of databases, think of a big spreadsheet. In this case, Excel itself is the database. And you notice we're not really doing anything with the database. It's the table, which is this whole thing. The table is what we're doing stuff with. We add information, we add data into the table. We can update information in the table, data in the table. We can remove data from the table. We can retrieve data from the table. It's the table inside of the database that we're really sort of going to be interacting with. And you can see down here at the bottom, we have sheet 1, sheet 2, it's empty. Sheet 3, it's empty. These are additional tables. So a database can have lots of tables. You can have a table for your customers. You can have a table for your email list subscribers. You can have a table for old customers that haven't bought anything in over 5 years. Whatever you want, you can have as many tables as you want, and you can pull stuff from each table at will. So that's pretty cool. But the database itself, you're not really doing anything with. It's all the table. It's all the records and the rows within the tables. So that's really sort of all I wanted to talk about. We'll talk about data types a little bit later. There are certain types of data that you can use in databases, and you sort of need to know what those are. Every database has different data types. They're all pretty much the same, but they're all called slightly different things. So we'll learn about what MySQL's data types are a little bit later. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. Just think of databases as big spreadsheets and you won't go wrong. So in the next video, we're going to start to download and install the tools that we're going to need, and that'll be coming up in the next video. Okay, in this video, we're going to start to download and install the different tools that we're going to need throughout this course. And we're going to need 3 or 4 different things. They're all free, so that's cool. But we're just going to knock these out one at a time. In this video, we're going to look at installing Python. So just go to python.org. And I should say, if you have Python on your computer already, it's probably a good idea to uninstall it and reinstall it. And I'll show you why in just a minute. If you're on a Mac or Linux, you're going to want to update. A lot of Mac and Linux come with Python already, but it's a very old version of Python that you do not want to use. So you want to be using Python version 3 and above. And Mac and Linux computers often come with Python 2. So we don't want that. So it's always a good idea to install this. If you already have Python on your Windows computer, I just clicked on my Windows Start menu and clicked Control Panel. And then just go down to Uninstall a Program. And let's find Python. And I'm just going to really quickly uninstall this just to show you how to do it. It just takes a second. We might as well. It's really a lot better to do this. And I'll show you why in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this video while this goes and uninstalls, and then we'll pick up right when it finishes. Okay, so I went ahead and finished uninstalling. We can close that. If you look, there's also this Python launcher. If you want to uninstall that too, you can. It's not probably a big deal. I'll go ahead and do that just because. As you can see, it isn't taking quite so long. And boom, that's gone. So once that's gone, we can head over to python.org and just click the download button right here at the top. And you can see we can download for Windows. It knows I'm on a Windows computer. If you're on a Mac or Linux, it'll give you the Mac or Linux version. And you can see Python 3.7.0, that's the current version. If it's a different version by the time you watch this video, that's perfectly fine. Just download the latest version and you should be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. Now we can save this anywhere. I'm just going to save it on my Windows desktop. And it's not very large, 24.3 megabytes. It downloads on my computer almost instantly. So go ahead and click this and let's open this. There you go. Okay, so here it says install Python. Now this is the important part. See down here, it says add Python 3.7 to path. And this is unchecked by default. This is why I told you to uninstall Python if you already had it on your computer, because chances are last time you installed it, you didn't notice this little checkbox and you just click next like people do. But we really want this checked. Adding Python 3.7 to the path means, in Windows at least, that you can run Python from anywhere on the computer. And we really want to do that, so it's very important to check that little box. If you don't check it, all kinds of problems can happen, and we just don't want to deal with that. So go ahead and make sure that's checked, and then click the Install Now button. And initializing. So this is going to take just a second. I think while this is going, oh, no, it's going fast. Well, in the meantime, while that's doing this, I also want to show you, let's head over to Sublime Text, just search for it at Google, and you see this sublimetext.com. This is the text editor I'm going to be using throughout this course. Now, you can use any text editor you want. It absolutely doesn't matter, as long as it's a coding text editor. You know, Atom is a popular one. What are some other ones? Notepad++ is a popular one. Sublime is super, super popular. It's absolutely free, and I recommend it highly. So go ahead and download and install this if you want to follow along and use the same text editor. I'm not going to show you how to download and install this. It's just a basic text editor. You just click the button and click the button again, and it'll install for you. But you can go ahead and do that yourself. In the meantime, let's check back and see how our Python is going. Oh, almost done. So I will go ahead and pause the video while this finishes up. Should be just a second. And we will, oh, there it goes. Almost done. We'll pick up as soon as it finishes. Okay, so setup was successful. Everything looks okay. Go ahead and click close. And that's it. We're done. We're ready to use Python now. So in the next video, I think we'll start to install something called Git Bash. I'll tell you what that is and why we need it. And that'll be in the next video. Okay, so we've installed Python. Now we need to install something called Git Bash. And if you go to git-scm.com, you can download this cool little thing. And all this is just a little terminal. And it allows us to run terminal commands, much like Mac or Linux, but on Windows. So, you know, in order to run Python, you need a command line, a terminal of some sort. And Microsoft has the command prompt and PowerShell, and those work, but Git Bash is just much, much better. It allows us to do version control using Git, which I don't think we'll be doing in this course because we don't really need to. But in real life, you want version control, so you want to use something like this Git Bash thing. And it's super free and super easy and very lightweight and very cool. So we're just going to go ahead and download and install that in this course. So come down here, and you can see this in this little monitor picture here. You see this download 2.18.0 for Windows. If it's a different version by the time you watch this video, again, that's perfectly fine. Just download the latest version. So go ahead and click that, and your download is starting. Pops up. Save this anywhere. I'm just going to save it to my desktop again. And this is 39.2 megabytes. But for some reason, every time I download it, it takes forever. It must be the website or something, because it always takes me a long time to download this. It should be almost instantly, but it isn't for some reason. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while this downloads, and we'll pick it up right after it finishes. Okay, so we've gone ahead and downloaded it. So we can go ahead and click this and run it. And this actually, pull this over here, is a little bit tricky to install. There's a couple of things we need to click in order to make this work correctly. So I'll walk you through it here. So right away, make sure this Git Bash here thing is clicked. We probably need that, not a big deal, but go ahead and click next. Next. Okay, here's one weird thing. It asks for the default editor to use, and it's saying use Vim. Now, we're not ever going to use Git in an editor, so we could just leave this as the default. I don't even know what this is. It's kind of weird. So just click next. Now here's the important part, adjusting your path environment. We want to use Git and optional Unix tools from the Windows command prompt, right? So this will allow us to use Git from the Windows command prompt if we want. We probably won't do that. We're going to use the little terminal that comes with this instead, but it's good to click that anyway. So click next. Now we want to make sure Open SSH is clicked and SSL library. Check out Windows style with commit Unix style line endings. That's good. Use min_tty. That's good too. All of these can be the default. And that's it. So this should install pretty quickly, but I'll go ahead and, well, nope, I was going to pause until it's finished, but it's already halfway done. So I think we could just chat for another couple of seconds until it finishes. And that's cool. So it really doesn't matter, like I said earlier, what terminal you use for this course, because all of the commands we're going to be running in our git bash terminal, you can run in Windows PowerShell or the Windows command prompt that come installed with Windows. But for people that are on Mac or Linux, I can use Mac or Linux type commands in this git bash terminal, which is really, really cool. So everyone should be able to follow along, and that's cool. So we can uncheck this view release notes, and let's go ahead and launch git bash. Click finish. In the future, if you want to turn this thing on, just go to your Windows Start menu and search for git, G-I-T, and that should work. So that's it. We can type in sort of commands, and this is cool. So we'll use this going forward. I'll tell you how to use this and what it can do and all kinds of cool stuff. But I think that's all for this video. In the next video, we'll jump in and start to download actual SQL, MySQL, and look at the different tools we're going to need for that. And that's coming up in the next video. Okay, so we've got Python installed, we've got git bash installed. Now we want to start to install MySQL. And this could be a little tricky for people because I don't really know why. It's open sourced and a little glitchy sometimes. So it may take a little bit of doing to get this installed properly. So we need two things here. We need MySQL, the database software, the server, and we also need something called the MySQL Workbench. And the Workbench is sort of a GUI, a graphical user interface that lets us access our MySQL databases, add information, add data, remove data, do all kinds of cool stuff. Now we're going to be doing most of our stuff in this course with Python. So we're going to be writing Python code to do this, but it's still nice to have the Workbench to check and see that things are correct. And it's just a cool little tool to have. So we'll download and install both of those. You can install them separately or you can install them together. We're going to go ahead and download them and install them together in this video. So go to mysql.com. You can search for MySQL at Google or just go to mysql.com and click the downloads link here at the top. And you see there's all kinds of different options of what you want to download. So you see the ones at the top are all commercial. You have to pay for them. So the MySQL Cloud Service, commercial, Enterprise Edition, commercial, Cluster, commercial. Down here at the bottom is the MySQL Community Edition, and that's what we want. GPL is open source licensed. So we click this community GPL download link. Okay, so now we get this MySQL Community Server link. Down here is the Workbench, but we don't need to install it separately. It'll install with the version we're going to download in just a second. There's all kinds of things here, connectors, repositories. We don't really need any of those things. We're going to get everything we need bundled together in one download. So go ahead and click this MySQL Community Server link. And scroll down here and then click on your operating system. It's probably already selected. Mine is, it says Microsoft Windows. And then come down here and we want this MySQL installer for Windows. And it has everything we want all in one package, you see. So we can go ahead and click this. Otherwise, you're going to have to download a zipped archive and it's all kinds of hassle and we don't want to deal with any of that. So I'm going to click go to the download page. Now this is the download MySQL installer download page. And again, we go down here and select the operating system that we want. In our case, Microsoft Windows. So here's the weird thing. Here's two versions, right? One is only 15 megabytes. The other one is 273 megabytes. And you may be tempted to download this smaller version, but don't do it. What this is the small version here, it just downloads a small little package, and then you run that package, and then that package downloads the rest, right? But it's a little buggy. I've found it not work very well. It'll start to download things, and then the download will stop, and it'll freeze, and it won't start back up again, and there's no restart button. It's just a hassle. In my opinion, just download the full version, 273.4 megabytes. Get it all downloaded at once, and then you can install it, and it works just much easier. So go ahead and click the download button for this thing. And it asks you to sign up for an account. You do not have to do that. I don't recommend you do that. There's no reason to. Just go down here to the bottom and click this no thanks, just start my download link. Do that. Pops up. Install this anywhere you want. I'm going to install it on the desktop. Now you see I've already installed it on my computer, so I don't have to do it again, but you go ahead and do that. It is 273 megabytes. It's going to take a while. I'm going to go ahead and pause this because, like I said, I've already downloaded it. Cancel. But you go ahead and do that. And in the next video, I think we'll go ahead and actually install this thing. Okay, so we've downloaded the thing. Now we can go ahead and install it. So you want to click this thing right here in the bottom once it's finished downloading. Myself, I've already downloaded it, so I'm going to go over to my desktop where I downloaded it and double click it there. Either one works. Pull this over. Okay, so we get this MySQL installer. Now you may have to restart your computer after you install all this stuff. In fact, I probably recommend that you do that just to make sure. A little message. Do we want to on? Yes. Okay, so it's gathering some information. Now this could take a little while to install, so that's why I sort of put it on its own video. But we'll walk through it and see what we can see, and should be fun. Okay, MySQL installer 1.4. If it's a different version by the time you watch this video, no big deal. Okay, so right off the bat, we get a license agreement. Click OK, and then next. Okay, so there's a bunch of different things we can install. We can go full, we can go custom. We probably want this developer default, and it installs with all the products that we need for development purposes. So go ahead and click that already. It's already clicked. You just go ahead and click next. If you want to go back and look through here, these are the type of things that comes with it. The SQL Server itself, a shell, a router, the MySQL Workbench, which we're definitely going to use. MySQL for Excel, I don't know what that is, some other things. So go ahead and just click next. Now, let's see, some products have path conflicts. Let's see. I'm getting this probably because I've installed this in the past. You probably won't get this. Selected path already exists. Yeah, so we just leave this the way it is. You won't get this error because, like I said, I'm only getting this because I installed this previously. So click next. Sure, I want to continue. Yes. There's some weird requirements. It says 3.6 version of Python has not been installed, but we installed version 3.7, I think. So it doesn't really matter. We can just ignore these. If you want to try and fix them manually, you can, but I think you could just ignore this. I always have in the past. So click next. Want to continue? Yes. Okay, so these are all the things it's going to install, right? So we can just go ahead and click execute and let it just do its thing. So it can take a while to do this, or sometimes it can be very speedy. It just sort of depends on how your computer, how fast it is, and how ornery it is, I think. So already we've got MySQL Server installed. Next, we're working on the Workbench. And these two things, these top two things, the Workbench and the server, those are the two most important things that we really need. You probably need some of this other stuff, but it's not that important. Down here at the bottom, samples and examples. We'll actually look at that just to get an idea of what we can do with the database. You know, there's like fake data in there that we can play with, and we'll play around with that a little bit, but it's not terribly important that you install all that stuff. MySQL documentation, you can take a look at that if you want. I don't think I ever have, but it's in there if you want to take a look at it. But that should be cool. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video because this is going to take a while to install. We'll go ahead and pick this up as soon as it's finished. Okay, so everything has installed. has been completed. We can go ahead and click Next. Okay, so now these things need to be configured. Click Next here. We just want this standalone MySQL Server thing at the top, the default. That works fine. Click Next. All of these things we can keep as the default. Recognize here this port 3306, sort of important. Don't really need to make a note of it, but just keep that in mind. TCP/IP, all these things. We don't really care about any of this stuff. Just click Next. Okay, so it's going to ask for a password. And, well, first it wants to use strong passwords. So that's good. Go ahead and click Next. Okay, so every time, so you've got your database, right? It has a user, and then that user has a password. And in order to connect to the database, especially from like Python, you need to know the password and the username. And most of the time, the username is just root. That's just what it is. But then we need to pick a password. So if you're going to be serious about this stuff, if you're going to use this for like actual web development stuff, pick a very strong password. We're not going to be, and we don't really care. So I'm just going to type in password 123. Let me do that again. Password 123. Repeat it. Password 123. Again, I'm not suggesting you do that because you can see right here it's very weak. But just for our purposes of learning this thing, it doesn't really matter, so that's fine. Now, you don't need to add a user because root already is a user, so we're going to be the root user. In computer science, root is like the all-powerful super user. It's called the root user. So just for your information. So go ahead and click Next. We want to configure MySQL Server as a Windows service. That's fine. We can leave all these things as the default. Okay, so now we just click this execute to apply all those things we just did, which wasn't much anything. We took the default for most of those things. All right, and you can see now it's initializing the database, which means it's turning it on. And this will, I think, pop up, or the database will turn on in the background, I think, every time you start your computer. Now you can configure it not to do that if you want, but it's going to be on from now on. And that's good because we don't want to have to turn it on every time we want to access it from our program. We want it sort of just running in the background always. But if you don't want that, you can change the settings. I'll leave that to you. It's pretty simple. You can just Google it or something. All right, so let's see. I'm going to go ahead and pause this again while it goes through all these, and we'll pick it up as soon as it's finished. Okay, so all of the things have finished, and we're pretty much done. So we can click this finish thing. Oh, no, we need to configure some other things. So go ahead and click Next. We don't want to click this. This NODB cluster thing is not something we want any part of. So click Finish. Next again. We want this standalone server thing, yes. Okay, so let's go ahead. It wants us to type in our password. Remember, that's just password 123. Check. All connections succeeded. And this just runs a little test to make sure it's running, that we are able to connect to it, that our password works and all that stuff. So that's good. Next. One last execute, I think. Okay. So we're done with that. It's like start MySQL Workbench after setup. Actually, let's not do either of those. You can if you want. You go ahead and click this, but I'm going to show you how to start it from scratch. So in the future, you could start it without having to go through all this again. So go ahead and click Finish. And I think we are done. So in the next video, we'll dive right in and start learning how to connect Python to MySQL and make sure everything was set up correctly and move on from there. Okay, so we've installed MySQL, we've installed Git Bash, we've installed Sublime Text, we've installed Python. So we have all the tools that we're going to need. Now we just need to start putting all these things together and start using them. So first, let's head over to our Git Bash terminal. If you've already closed this, just go back to your Windows Start menu and type in Git, G-I-T, and then the little bash thing will pop up and you can click on that to open it. And here we have the terminal. This is it. So you can see I'm in this pwd, I'm in this C users flat planet directory. This is just my default directory. And it's flat planet because that's the name of my computer, because I think it's hilarious that some people still think the world is flat. It's going to be whatever your computer username is. That's the directory you're going to be in. So let's go ahead and make a new directory to store our Python files that we're going to be creating throughout this course. So just type in mkdir, and that stands for make directory. That works on Mac or Linux too. And let's go /c, and let's create a directory called MySQL. Okay, so now if we go cd, which stands for change directory, we can change into MySQL. Clear the screen. So I can see, yes, I'm in MySQL. Type in ls. There's not actually anything in there at the moment, and that's fine. We haven't created anything yet. But before we move forward, we need to install one more thing in the background here. So in order for Python to connect to MySQL, we need a module that allows us to do that. And there's 3 or 4 of them. They're all the same, but, well, slightly different. Basically the same, but they're all called slightly different things. And the reason why is because sometimes one of them won't work on your computer. So the thing we're installing is called MySQL Connector, and it's just, let me just copy this here. To install this, we're going to type in the command pip install, and pip is the Python program installer. And one of the reasons why we click that add path box when we installed Python is so that pip can install programs anywhere on our computer. So pip install, and the thing we're going to install is MySQL Connector. Now, sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't, right? So I'll tell you what to do if it doesn't work. And I'm getting a little antivirus thing on my other monitor. You can't see it. You can just abort that. It says, this is trying to connect to the internet. Is it okay? Yes, it's okay. So now it's doing its thing. I've already installed this in the past, right? So it doesn't have to install it again. Yours will go through a little thing and it'll install it. Okay, so that might be enough, right? But there's 2 other ones we can install just to make sure. Because when I install MySQL Connector, it doesn't work for me on this computer. It's worked on other computers for me, but not this one. So I go to the next one, which is pip install MySQL Connector -Python. You see the first one was MySQL Connector. Now it's MySQL Connector -Python. Same basic thing, slightly different. This one might work for you. You can see I've already installed it, so I'm getting the same thing. Finally, there's a third one. And let me clear the screen here. And it is just, let's see, paste. Pip install MySQL Connector -Python -RF, right? So we're just adding things on to the end to make them slightly different. But if the first 2 don't work, go ahead and try this one. And I'm not going to install this one because the second one worked for me just fine. I know it's kind of, kind of wonky, but it's just the way this is. I'm not sure why. Okay, so in the next video, we'll go ahead and start to write our first Python code. Okay, so we've installed everything we need to install. Now it's time to start writing some Python code. So let's just open a file here in Sublime Text, and I'm going to import that thing we just installed in the last video. So MySQL.connector, right? So we want to save this right away as a Python file. So come up here and click Save As, and navigate to that directory we created a while back. It was in our C MySQL folder. And let's just call this, I don't know, database. That's fine. And come down here to all files and programs or whatever, and look for Python right here. Select that, Python, and then click Save. Another way you might do it, hit Cancel here, come up here to View, and then Syntax, and then scroll down to Python. You can see now the colors change a little bit. So now Sublime knows this is Python. So now when we come up here and hit File, Save As, it's already selected Python for us. Just another way to do it. So again, let's scroll down to our C MySQL folder. Let's call this database and save it. Okay, so we've imported the MySQL connector module that we just installed. Now, if you try this and it doesn't work, and then you have to go back and pip install MySQL connector -Python, or pip install MySQL connector -Python -RF, you can still get away with just importing MySQL.connector. You don't have to import MySQL.connector.python, for instance. I believe that's the case. If you run it and it still doesn't work, try doing that. You never know. Okay, so now we need to create an instance of our database that's running in the background. Remember when we installed the database, it fired up, it initialized, and it's just sort of in the background, running. Now we need to connect to it. So let's create an instance of variable, so to speak, and let's call this, I don't know, my database, and set it equal to this MySQL.connector.connect. Now we need to pass in a few variables. So we need to pass in, at this point, 3 variables. The first one is host, and then a comma. The next one is user, comma, and then finally password, PASSWD, 2 quotation marks. And then I don't think you have to put a comma at the end, but I always do just in case, because we're going to be adding things in the future. And if we forget to put it on there in the future, we'll get an error. So I just put it on there now. So host, this is the URL of your database. So most of the time when you're working in actual web development or something, your database is up in the cloud somewhere, and you'll have a URL for that database, like 192.168.40.9 or something, right? We're running our database on our local computer, on our own computer. So we can just type in localhost here, right? Now, remember when we set up the database, our user was root. So that's root. And that password we picked when we set up the database was password123, right? So that's pretty much it. We can now connect using just that. So to prove that this worked, we can print out this MyDB variable that we just created. So if we save this, head over to our little bash terminal thing and pwd to make sure we're in this C MySQL directory, ls to list the stuff. We can see, oh, there's that database.py file. So now let's just run this thing. So Python database.py, and this is how you run Python programs. You type in Python and then the name of the program. Boom, we get this MySQL.connector.connection.MySQL connection.object. So we've created an object here, and this is just a URL, not a URL, it's an address in memory where this thing is sitting. So this means absolutely nothing to us, except it means that it worked. It means the database was set up correctly. It means we were able to connect to it from our MySQL or from our Python program, and we haven't done anything. We haven't entered any data or queried any data or anything like that, but this is important. We now know it works. So this is very cool. And really, this is as easy as it gets. I mean, it's not any more complicated to connect to a MySQL database from a Python program. You just import this MySQL connector thing, create a connection here, add in your host name, your username, and your password, and then boom, you're connected. So now it's just a matter of learning the different commands in Python to, for instance, create a new table, then to add data to the table, then to retrieve data from that table, order it in different ways, things like that, all the basic database stuff you want to do. And that's what we're going to spend sort of the rest of the course learning how to do. But meat and potatoes of this stuff is done. We've created a database, we've connected to it, and we're good to go. So in the next video, I think we'll look at the MySQL workbench and sort of get a sort of an understanding of what is all available to us in our database. And that's a good way to look at it through the MySQL workbench because it's a graphical user interface, and that's really cool. So I think we'll start to look at that in the next video. Okay, in this video, we're going to take a quick look at the MySQL workbench. It's a little software that installed when we installed MySQL, and it's actually really cool. It gives us a graphical user interface, a GUI, for our MySQL database. So now, throughout the rest of the course, we're going to be doing mostly all of this stuff in Python, but I just want to spend a few minutes kind of looking at this software because it's really cool and you'll find it useful, for debugging, for making sure you've got things correct, and generally just looking at your database. Sometimes it's better to just look at it instead of running a Python program and pulling data out manually. So that's what we're going to look at in this video. So head over to your Windows Start menu. This is on my other monitor. You can't actually see it, but go to the little search thing and just type in MySQL. And the first thing that pops up will probably be the MySQL workbench. And ours is version 8.0 CE, which is Community Edition, I think, which is the free thing that we downloaded, the free version. And let's pull this over. And this is it. So it's really cool. You see right here, we have our little instance of MySQL that's running. Here's root, localhost. I don't know why it's called WAMPy MySQL, but I think I have WAMP, which is another program, PHP program installed. Maybe that's why it says that. But you can add other connections or whatever. And we have some things here on the side. So I'm just going to double click this. And boom, this thing pops right up. And this is it. It's sort of everything right here. And it kind of looks overwhelming. There's a whole lot of stuff here, but it's not too bad. So over here, you see these schemas. When you create database tables, a schema is created. It's sort of like a snapshot of the database. And you can see we have 3 of them already, 3 tables, or 3 databases, I should say, already installed. And that's because when we installed MySQL, expand this a little bit, we installed some documentation and example data. That's what this stuff is, some of this example data. So here we have this world database. Inside we have some tables. So if we click on that, we see city, county, country, city, country language, and some other things. So let's click on city. And we have even more. Then we have columns, ID, name, country code. So let's go on name. So if we double click this, right up here it just says name. So see this little lightning bolt up here? This allows us to run SQL queries. And we'll talk about SQL queries coming up in some further videos from now. But basically, whenever you do anything to the database, whenever you pull data out, push data in, do anything at all to a database, you're running a query. And the query language that we use is SQL. That's why we call this MySQL. So this is just a very basic SQL command, I guess. If we hit this little thing, see error code. Yeah, that's not a good SQL command. I'm going to go ahead and close this or delete it. Okay. Instead, let's right click here. And what we want to do is select rows, limit 1000. If we hit this, boom, we get this actual graphical user interface representation of all of the names in this specific column in this specific table, I guess. So we see Kabul, Breda, I don't even know what some of these are. Tigra, San Fernando. And we can expand this, make it bigger. Sydney, Perth. It's just a list of, it looks like, city names around the world. And here's the actual SQL statement, the SQL query. Select name from world.city. And we'll talk about SQL queries and things like that later on. Not that important. Let's see. Let's go back. See if we can get a better view. I'm just going to click this city table here. Let's click the entire thing. So we have name, country code, district, and population. Cool. Interesting data here. And we don't care about this data. This is just example text that came with this. But kind of interesting. Let's go country, see what's in countries. So we right click, select rows. Basically what we're doing here is we're selecting the first 1000 rows in this table. Right? Oh, all kinds of stuff in this one. So we have the name, Aruba, continent, North America, region, Caribbean, surface area, population, life expectancy, all kinds of neat information here. We might play around with this a bit. Government form, republic, non-metropolitan territory of the something. Netherlands, it looks like. Fun. Head of state, George W. Bush. So I guess the head of state of America Samoa in Oceania, which is in Polynesia, is George W. Bush. I don't know about that. This must be a little bit outdated. Capital codes. Interesting. Very cool. So, and this is just, just a way to look at your data. And going forward, we're going to build our own tables and put some sort of practice data inside of them. And we can come in here and look at them in here if we want to. it's kind of useful from time to time. So, if you're doing like web development, you're not going to probably use this workbench. But if you're doing something locally and you just want to visualize your data, you just want to see it without having to write a bunch of Python code to do it, this is a great way to do it. So not only can you see things, but you can actually add things and edit things. Say we want to change Aruba. We can call this Arubas if we want, right? Now we just come down here. Actually, we tab away, and then we come down here to apply. Click that, and it creates the SQL code for us, update world country, where we want to set the name to equal Arubas, where the country code is ABW. So if we apply that, done. If we come up here and run this again, Arubas, oops, disappeared completely. Let's run it again. There we go, Arubas. Very cool. And if we double click this, we can change it back again. Hit enter, come down here and apply this again, and boom, it's back to Aruba. We refresh it, boom, Aruba. So very cool. And we'll come back to this workbench from time to time as we go through this course, just to sort of look at things and teach you a few things here and there that are interesting. Excuse me. But yeah, very cool. It comes free with MySQL. That's the MySQL workbench, and that's all for this video. In the next video, we'll start to actually write some more complicated Python code in order to create tables and add our data and do all the fun stuff. That'll be starting in the next video. Okay, in this video, I want to create a new database and show it from a Python program. So we're here in the workbench right now. We can create a new database here if we wanted to, and we'll look at doing that maybe a little bit later, but we want to do this in Python. This is a course in how to do all this stuff in Python. So the one thing I do want to show you before we go is, see my mouse? It's sort of floating around here. That's a mouse cursor, right? And when I want to do things in here, I do them with my cursor. If I want to refresh this, I take my cursor and I refresh that, right? I click this little thing. If I want to, apply something, I take my cursor and I apply. So we sort of do the same thing in Python, but instead of like obviously dragging a cursor around, we're not going to do that. We're actually writing Python code, but we're still going to create sort of an instance of a cursor. It's called a cursor, and that cursor can sort of execute commands in our SQL database. In our case, MySQL database, right? So let's take a look at how to do this. So we don't need to print this anymore. We're going to keep all of these things always right here at the top of our program, because we always need these whenever we want to do MySQL stuff from a Python program. So what we can do here is, let's create an instance of a cursor, and I'm just going to call this my underscore cursor, SOR. Okay, you can call it anything you want, but it's a cursor, so I'm going to call it my cursor. Now we need to create an instance of this in our MyDB connection, right? So we just go MyDB.cursor and then put the little things there, because this is kind of like a function. We can pass things in through there, right? So, okay, we've created this thing. Now what do we want to do? Well, let's create our own database. We've got the database running, but we don't have our own database that we've created yet. We did this, let me pull this up here. We looked at this world database, right? Well, that's fine, but we want to create our own database. So how do we do that? Well, we can just use our cursor. We're going to use the cursor for most everything from now on. So just sort of get used to this cursor thing, right? So we always start out with naming it my cursor. And then we want to execute a command. So we type in execute and then pass in some parameters. So what do we want to do in this specific case? We want to create a database, just a database, not a table yet. We'll do that a little bit later. We just want to create the database. So we pass in some quotation marks and we just type in create database, and then we need to name our database. And let's just call this test DB, right? And that's it. So notice these are capital letters. These are SQL commands, right? So we're passing a SQL command into MySQL. And the SQL command in this case is create database. Oh, misspelled database. There we go. I knew that should be a different color. So we're creating a database. We're calling it testDB. Now we can just run this and it should work. So let's pull up our git bash and we could just run python database.py and nothing happens on the screen, right? Because we didn't actually tell it to show anything. But we can pull up our MySQL workbench here and come over here to schemas and then click this little refresh button. And then boom, you see we have this testDB. Now there's nothing really in it. If we click tables, there's no tables, there's no anything, but we created the database and it's in MySQL and ready to start working. So very, very cool and pretty simple. Just one little, well, two little lines really, but this doesn't count because we're just always going to do this to sort of initialize our cursor. One little command to execute it. So very cool. Now, before we move on, we just looked at MySQL Workbench to see if the database existed or not. How do we do that from a Python program if that's what we want? Very simple. We just go my_cursor.execute. Execute a lot of commands here. And inside of here, we want to pass more SQL commands. And so we want to show databases, right? And then this is going to show a list of databases because if we pull back up our workbench, we see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, right? We can just run this command. Let's see, pull this back up. We could go something like print my cursor, right? But it's going to show an object like we did earlier. If we could save this here, let's come up here and we don't need to run this create database command again because we've already created it. So let's just save this real quick and come up here and run it. And you can see MySQL cursor show databases. It shows us that command. It doesn't show us what we actually want to see. So that doesn't work that great. Instead, we can create a for loop that allows us to loop through all of the databases that are there and print them onto the screen. So let's do that real quick instead. So we just go for create a variable databases in my cursor, and then we just print that DB, right? So let's save this, head over here and run it. And boom, we get a list, a nice little sort of tuple list of each of these databases in our MySQL database. So we have information schema, we have the MySQL performance schema, we have the Sakila, Sys, testDB, and world. And if we open this up, here we have the same Sakila, Sys, testDB, and world. Those other two are hidden ones that are just sort of system databases that we don't really care about. So very cool and pretty simple. So you see, when we printed this out, it printed it out as a sort of a big tuple. And that's what this is. It's a tuple. So if we want to, be a little nicer about this, we could do something like call the 0th item of the tuple, something like that. That might work. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so then it looks a little bit nicer. And then you can run some formatting, and we'll talk about that later on as we create reports and stuff in Python. How to format. We'll show you how to do that, and that'll be cool. So I think that's all for this video. In the next video, we'll create our own table and then start to put data into the table, and that'll be cool. And that's coming up in the next video. Okay, in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a table. So up until now, we just created this testDB database, and then we showed the database. So how do we create a table? Well, first things first, now that we've created a database, test database, we need to sort of let our program know from now on we want to use just that database. So we head up here to our configuration at the very top here, and it's pretty simple. We just need to just type in database and set it equal to something, and then put a comma at the end. Now, our database was called testDB, and that's really all we have to do. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now you can see here I've started to comment out the thing we did in the prior video, and I think I'm going to leave these in here, and then at the end of the course I'll give you all this code so you can have all this as sort of a quick reference guide. I think that'll probably be helpful, and we'll just keep on moving down the page here, doing new things. So in this video, like I said, we want to create a table. So Like everything we always want to do, we want to start out creating a cursor and set that equal, well, actually I want to .execute. And then this time we want to pass in a whole bunch of stuff. So first off, we want to do a little SQL command. And the SQL command for creating a table is create table. You're going to find that SQL commands are pretty simple and straightforward. You can learn SQL as a programming language. It's not really a programming language. It's just this easy. If you want to create a table, you type create table. If you want to show a database, you type show database. You know, it's pretty straightforward. So we'll see that moving forward. So let's think about the type of table we want to create. Let's say we've got a website and we want people to be able to sign up. So we want to create users. And so let's call our table users. Now, inside of here, we need to pass in all the stuff that we want in this table. And we do that like this. So we haven't actually talked about data types yet, and we will very shortly. But every time you create a new column, that's what we're basically doing here. We're creating all the different columns we want for each row of our database here, of our table. So each row or each column has to be of the same data type. We talked about in that very first video. And here's where we designate what that data type is. So I'm just going to go through here and type some of these out, and then we'll talk about them afterwards. So let's say we want a name field. Now you can have first name, last name. I'm just going to keep it simple for this. So we want name, and we want the data type for that name to be var_char. And then inside of that, we want to say 255. Now 255 is the number of text items, you know, the number of things that will be in that column. So the max is 255, so I'm going to put 255. So for instance, you know, if somebody types in John Elder, right, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 characters long, right? As long as it's less than 255, we can put that in there in that column. So it's just a sort of a, you know, tells you the max amount of characters that you can add. So that's var_char, and we'll talk about var_char and some of these other data types, you know, moving forward. So let's see, what else do we want? Let's put email, and that's going to be a var_char again. Let's just put 255. Now, back in the day when databases were new, you really wanted to be careful and put like just the number of characters that you needed, because memory and space, computer space, was very expensive back in the day, and there wasn't much memory available to add these things. There wasn't much, you know, disk space to hold this stuff. These days, you know, computers are huge, web servers are huge. It really doesn't matter how many characters are in each column. So I tend to just put the max for everyone because, you know, who cares? If you're working for Google and you need to scale and it needs to be lightning fast, then maybe you're going to, instead of putting 255, you might put 50 or something. You know, you might scale it down just to get that 100,000th of a percentage point speed, you know, thing. We don't care about that, right? So, okay, var_char email, comma. Let's say we want the person's age, right? So age is going to be an integer, and I don't know, 10 characters. I mean, really, we need 3 characters at the most. Nobody's more than 900 years old, right? 999. So, but I'll just put 10 just because. Okay, so then finally, we want to put a user ID. So I'll just go user ID, and this is a little interesting. We want this to be an integer, and we want this to auto increment, and we want this to be the primary key. Now, this is a whole lot of stuff that you don't know what any of this is yet, but we want some number that's unique for each row, right? So if we want to look up John Elder, well, there might be 10 John Elders in our, you know, people have the same name, you know. How do we designate which one's which? Well, they need a user ID, and those numbers need to be unique, right? So that's what this does. It creates a unique number. It assigns it automatically. So it just says, who was the last one? Oh, the last one was number 8. This guy's number 9. the next one will be number 10. You know, it does that automatically, it auto increments for us. And primary key, actually we need to make that capitalized. Primary key means that this is the main key that we're going to use to keep things, keep track of things. You can have lots of different IDs. This is going to be the primary one. It's just a database thing. So that's pretty much it. That will create a table. Now, we can test this to see if it works. We can go myCursor.execute, and then we can pass in show tables, right? And then we could do the same thing we did in the last video. We can go for table in myCursor, and then go just print table, right? So let's save this and run it, see if we made any mistakes. I make a lot of mistakes. I'm always doing typos, so let's just run this and see. And boom, we get users is the only table. And likewise, since this is a tuple, we can also do it like this. Add a 0, the 0th item in our tuple. We can run this guy again. Oops, what do we do? Oh, I ran this again. It tried to create another table. Oops, we need to comment that out since we've already created the table. All right, run this again. Boom, users in a nicely better formatted. And you notice if we pull up our workbench here, we have in this world thing, we have lots of tables, right? City, country, country language, etc. None of those things are showing up on our git bash when we run this command that, a second here, you know, we're showing tables. Why isn't it showing all of those other ones? Well, that's because up here, we told the program, oh no, we don't care about any of those other databases. We only want the test DB. So it's going into the test DB. It's calling all of the tables in that. And in this case, there's only one table, let's see, what do we call it? Users table. And likewise, we can pull up the workbench again, come over to our schemas, hit refresh, and then come down to test DB, tables, and then boom, we see this users, select rows 1000. There's none left, or there's none yet. We haven't added any people into our database, but you could see here the different columns: name, email, age, and user ID. So very, very cool and pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So that's all for this video. In the next video, we'll look at adding data to our new table, and that should be a lot of fun, and that'll be in the next video. Okay, in this video, I want to talk about inserting data into our new table. So in the last video, we added a table. We've got this users table. Now, how do we put stuff actually in it? Well, there's a couple of different ways. And I think in the first video, we're going to look at the first one, and that's just adding one row, one record. Now, you can add a bunch of records at the same time, but in this video, we're just going to do one. I think in the next video, we'll show you how to do many at the same time. So it's pretty straightforward. We just go, basically we create a variable, and let's just call this, I don't know, SQL stuff. It doesn't really matter. And set this equal to, now we need to create a SQL command. And when we add things into a table, we are inserting them into a table. So the SQL command to do that is insert into, right? Now we want to insert it into our users table, right? And now we just need to pass in what we're going to be putting in. So we had a name, an email, and an age. We don't need to put the user ID because the database will add that automatically since we put this auto increment thing. So we don't have to deal with that. So let's go name, comma, age. Now let's go name, comma, email, comma, age. It doesn't really matter well, yeah, it probably does matter where you put them. So we probably shouldn't do age, email. We'll do email, age, because that's the way they look in the actual table itself. So then we go values. And here, we're not going to put the actual values right here. We're going to put placeholders. And for our placeholder, we put a %s. And that's sort of like when you interpolate in a string with Python, you'll do the same sort of kind of thing. So that's what that is. So comma, and then we'll do it again, and then we'll do it again. Oops, S. There we go. And okay, so we do this 3 times because we have 3 things we're putting in here, right? Makes sense. And let's see what else. I think that works. So now we need to create a record, right? And we can call this anything we want. Let's just call it record 1. And let's add John. And my email is john@codemy.com. And my age is 40. And we need to put this all in brackets. I always forget that for some reason. Okay, so you'll notice John goes with name, this email goes with email, and this age goes with age. They're in the same order that we listed up here, and that's important because the placeholders will put them in the order that you put them in here. You'll also notice that the strings, or varchars, which we still haven't talked about, but we'll talk about in a minute, are surrounded by quotation marks, and the numbers are not. Generally speaking, when you do numbers in Python, you don't put them in quotation marks, because if you do, they turn into strings. They're no longer numbers when you put them in quotation marks. So no quotation marks. Okay, so whoops, that back. So now we need to actually put this into the database. And like everything we've done so far, we need to use our cursor. So let's go underscore cursor dot execute. Cute. And then we need to pass in 2 things. First, this SQL stuff. Oops. There we go. And then this record 1. Pretty simple. Now, if you just run this, it'll put this in the database, but it won't save it. So if you know anything about databases, if you've ever done like web development databases with, say, Ruby on Rails or Django, anytime you put stuff into the database, you need to commit those changes. It's called commit. You know, you're committing a change to the database, and we have to do that here. So our database connection is called MyDB. So down here we go mydb.commit, and then that, and that should work. So let's go ahead and save this. Now, we didn't write any code to show anything on the screen, so if we run this, nothing will happen on the screen, hopefully, unless we get an error. Nothing happened, but now we can pull up our workbench here. This is why this is kind of handy. We can just eyeball this, head over to schemas, and then click on testdb, tables, users. Now let's right click and do this select rows, limit 1000, and boom, John at Codemy, age 40. And look at this, it has a user ID of 1. Very cool, huh? So that's how you add 1 record. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Yeah. And you see up here, this is the SQL, right? Select, the star stands for everything, from testdb.users, and then this semicolon. And we'll talk more about SQL as we go along. Actually, you'll start to pick it up as I just keep doing things, and it's very simple and straightforward. So that's all for this video. In the next video, we'll look at adding multiple records at once, and then after that, we'll talk about data types, because we should have talked about that a couple videos ago, but I tend to gloss it over. But we will definitely talk about data types, and if I forget, remind me, because it's important. So that'll be in the next couple of videos. Okay, in the last video, we added 1 record. In this video, we want to add a bunch of records. And it's pretty much the same process. It's just slightly different. So we're going to start out, I've commented this out, but we need this insert into line. So we'll go ahead and copy and paste that into here. And this stays the same because we're doing the same thing. We're adding into users. We're adding name, email, and age, same 3 placeholders, right? So we're good to go there. Now, in the last video, we just did this, we created 1 record, right? And it was John at Codemy, and 40. So now we want to create lots of records. So I'm just going to call this records. And what we need to do here is we need to create an array. And this is just a Python array. And if you're familiar with Python arrays, that's great. An array is just a list of things, basically. Actually, in Python, they call them lists. They don't call them arrays. I'm thinking of Ruby. All right, every other programming language in the world calls arrays arrays. In Python, they call them lists. So we need to create a list, and that list has to be made up of different items, and each item will be a tuple. And a tuple is like a list, it's just slightly different. The main difference is that they're in these parentheses instead of brackets. So we need to add as many of these as we want. So let's add, I don't know, 3 or 4. Yeah, let's add 4. Let's get crazy, right? So inside of here, we just put, just like we just did with John at Codemy, and the age, we just put whatever we want. So let's go Tim, right? Tim is at tim@tim.com. And Tim's age is 32. That's it, right? So if we want to add Mary, comma, Mary@Mary.com, very sophisticated. Mary is 21. Okay. And let's see, who else? Steve, comma, Steve@Steve email, mix it up a little, .com. And Steve is 57. And finally, who do we want? Let's put Tina. Tina, how's Tina doing? Tina is at something else.com. And Tina is what? 19? 29? 29, right? Go ahead and save that. Now, just like before, we need to commit this. So I'm just going to copy this same thing here. And we also need our cursor. We need to execute the cursor. Now, in the last video, we added 1 record, right? We executed 1. In this video, we're adding many records. So we need to execute many, right? So that's the first change. Next, like in the last video, we start out by identifying our insert SQL command right here, and then we tell it what we want to add in. We're not adding records, we're not adding record 1, we're adding records, right? So go ahead and save that, and fingers crossed it works. Okay, nothing happened, so let's pull up our MySQL workbench and come up here and just hit the little lightning bolt and see if it updates, and boom, it does. Tim, Mary, Steve, Tina, and look at the user IDs. They're auto-incrementing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very, very cool. Ages are listed there. Awesome. Now, I'm going to talk about how to change data from a Python program, programmatically. But, like I said earlier, if you see an error here, like Steve is not 57, he's actually 56, you can change it from right in here. Just come up here, change it. Come down here, hit apply, finish, come up here and hit the little lightning bolt again to refresh it. And wait, did that change? Can't remember what it was before. Was it 57? Let's put it at 55 and see again. I'll remember that one. Apply, finish, refresh. Yep, 55. Must have been 57 earlier. It's been a long day. So, just keep that in mind. Now, you're not going to want to do that. I mean, that's kind of cheating, but you can in a pinch if you need to just fix something really quickly. And like I said, I'm going to show you later on how to do this from, an actual Python program. But yeah, that's how we insert many things from the program. Now, we can also, let's pull this up again real quick. We can also import entire databases from this thing here. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is how you just add like your own information from a program. So that's all for this video. In the next video, we'll talk about data types. I promised we'd talk about that earlier, but we really need to talk about it real quickly. It's not that tricky. I just need to point you in the right direction and tell you a couple of things about it, and then we'll be good to go. And then we'll get back into learning cool Python database stuff. So that'll be in the next video. Okay, in the last video, we talked about inserting many things into the database table. In this video, I want to talk very briefly about data types. So we've already touched on this in the past. Each column has to be of the same type. Here for name, all of the things in here are text, or in database terms, varchars. Here over here, we have age. Those are integers, right? So what are the different data types that are available? What are they called, and how do you use them? Well, every database is a little bit different, right? And they all call data types different things. One of them might be varchar, another one might just call it car. One of them might call it car field. But they're all sort of the same. You just have to look them up basically, because there's so many databases, and likely you're going to use other databases besides MySQL. Postgres is very popular. I'm building a course on Postgres. If you're interested in that, check back in a couple of weeks. Or likely it'll be out by the time you see this. But all databases have different types of data types. So let's see, let's pull up a web browser, and you just have to go to Google and type in MySQL data types. And there's a bunch of different. Now this is the MySQL, the actual docs. I don't recommend going there. It's confusing. It's a very silly thing. Let's see, W3 schools. Oh, that might work. Tutorials point, that's always a good one. We'll look at a couple of these and just see. So SQL data types, MySQL data types. All right, this is what we want. And you can see we have, here's just a list of them. Car, and then size, varchar size. And you can see holds a variable length string. Can contain letters, numbers, special characters. Maximum size is specified in parentheses. Can store up to 255 characters. If you put a greater value than 255, it will convert it to a text type. And that's down here, right? Car looks very similar. Varchar, I can't remember off the top of my head the difference between the two. Maybe the tutorial point says. Let's look through here. You must define, blah, blah, blah. Right padded with spaces. I don't know. I can't remember offhand. It's not terribly important. Varchar is the one you're always going to want to use. Just kind of trust me on that. Text blob. These are for binary objects. Images, maybe. Music files, things like that. Yeah. So then looking down here, we have different types of numbers. Tiny integers, small integers, medium integers, int. Notice I put integer. That works too. Or int, you can put. And there's different types of things. Float is like a decimal number, right? So if you're going to save like customer data, like if somebody bought something from you and it was $19.95, you wouldn't want to use integer because integer is a whole number. You would want to use float, you know, that sort of thing, or decimal, right? Double stored it as a string. No, you would not want that because then it turns it into a string. So very interesting. You can come through here, whatever you happen to need, and there are just millions of use cases, so I can't really go through all of them. But those are the different things. And the main sort of categories are text and numbers. Those are the ones you're going to use the most. But you could also use date. So here you can see different date things. Date, time, year, timestamp. Let's see. I think that's all. Now we're getting into different types of databases here. Yeah. So let's look at the tutorial point one real quick. Here we have the same int, medium, big int, data types for time, string types. So very interesting. And that's all there is to it, really. So like, don't try and memorize these because it's stupid. You don't need to do that. Just whenever you're designing your database, spend a minute, Google it, and go, oh yeah, I need to use varchar. Or if you have a specific use case that needs something that varchar doesn't quite work well with, you know, just go through the string types and find the one that does work, right? And they all work the same. You type, instead of varchar, you would type, you know, blob, and then the parentheses, and then the max length or whatever, just like we did with varchar. So yeah, I think that's data types. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Let's see. In the next video, I think we're gonna start to look at pulling data out of the database and like showing it on the screen, and that'll be in the next video. Okay, so we've added a bunch of data to our database, to our table. How do we get that information out, and how do we put it on the screen? So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So let's see. First, we need to, like always, create our cursor. Let's just go myCursor.execute as usual. And now to pull data from a database, we need to select it, right? We need to say, I want this specific data. So to do that, we run the select command, SQL command. Next, we need to tell it exactly what we want to select. So I just want to pull at this point everything. So let's select everything, and the star means everything. And then we need to say from what table, because we only have one table, but in the future you might have dozens of tables. So you need to say tables. So you need to say which table. Our table is called users, if I remember correctly. That's right. Right? Okay, so now we've selected it. Now let's put it into a variable that we can actually do stuff with. And let's call it our result. Call it whatever you want. And that equals my underscore cursor dot fetch all, right? So we're saying fetch it all from the selection that we've designated, right? So now we just need to print this onto the screen. So there's going to be a lot of different rows, probably. So we need to loop. So let's go for, what do we want to call this? Let's just call it row in result, and then just print row. Now this won't look pretty, and we'll make it look pretty in just a minute, but let's just run this to make sure it worked correctly. So let's run Python database.py, and boom, we get a tuple with all of our different things. So John at codemy.com, 40 and 1. So, okay, that's cool. We can do the same trick we did before and call the 0th item. And to do that, we just add that on there like that, like we've done before. And we get John, Tim, Mary, and Steve. Now, that just shows the 0th item. If you want then the next item, say the email address, that would be the first item, just in the way of tuples. Just a Python thing. And so we get all the things. If you then want the age, again, you can go through here, that. This again, 40, 32. And finally, if you want the IDs, that would be the third item. Right? So that's not that useful. We really need to sort of format this, and we'll do that in a little bit. So for now, we'll just do it like this so that we can see all of the information. We've already done this once, but I'll do it again because this is fun. And boom, we get all this stuff. So that is how to pull everything out, right? So what if you only want the names? Well, we showed we can just do, like this, pull the 0th item, but that's not all that efficient. We don't necessarily want to pull everything from our database and then loop through and just print out the names. Instead, we could just pull out just the names, and that's much better from a sort of speed, performance, memory point of view. So we can do that. Let's get rid of that. Instead of select star, instead of selecting everything, we just select name, right? So let's save this and run it. See what happens now. And boom, we get the same tuple, but it only contains the name, right? And likewise, we can do our trick again, where we add the 0th item, print this out, make it look a little nicer. John, Tim, Mary, Steve, and Tina. So very, very cool. Yeah, let's see what else. You can, instead of pulling every name, you could, for instance, just grab the first name. To do that, you would go, instead of fetch all, we want to fetch one, right? So this will just do the very first one, which I believe is John. Oh, J. Oh, because we pulled we called the 0th tuple item. Let's get rid of that. That's funny. All right. John, right? So that's kind of cool. I don't know how useful that is, but kind of interesting. So I think that's all for this video. In the next video, I think we'll go through here and print out everything, but kind of start to format it and make it look nice, more like a report form, so that it's actually readable. Right now we've got this. If we pull from star and then run this again, we get this whole gobbledygook stuff. It's all kind of smushed together. We can sort of figure out that this is the name, this is the email, but we don't know without some sort of formatting or something. So I think we'll do that in the next video. Okay, so we can print all our stuff out to the screen, but it's printing it out as a tuple. It's kind of wonky. We want to be able to create cool little reports that are, more readable. So how do we do that? Well, we already know if we do our little trick here and call the 0th item, save this and run it again. Excuse me, we get the first names, right? And if we do the first item, we get the emails. If we do the second item, we get the ages. If we do the third item, we get the user IDs. So what we can actually do is just come in here and create a big long string with each of those things, row 1, row 2, row 3, right? We just need to do a little bit of formatting using the same placeholder things that we did up here when we inserted our stuff into the table way back when, right? Remember we had the name, email, age, and then we had these 3 placeholder %s's. We're going to do the same thing here. So what we're going to do is add a plus, and then I'm going to put a space, and then %s, and then another space, and then to interpolate the thing back into the string, we just type another %sign, and then the thing that we want to put into the string. In this case, it's row 1, right? Then we want to add another one, put a space, %s, and then %row, what are we on, 2, right? And then finally, another one, %s. The space is so that there's a space between each one so that they're not all smushed together, which is something we'll tweak in a minute. Let's see, we got %row, let's see, 3. So these percentage signs, don't get confused by them. This is really simple. It just means this is the placeholder. It's inside of a string. We can't put variables inside of a string. It'll just print out row 3. It won't actually put what's in row 3 because it's in a string, right? So to get around that, we do these placeholders. And then what this does is it creates a placeholder, and then it looks for the next percentage sign, and then whatever's directly behind that, it puts that into the string. So if we save this and run it, hopefully I didn't mess this up. Let's clear the screen and run this, and boom, that worked. Now this is not great, right? I mean, it's readable and it's better, but it's still not great. So what we can do here is we can use tabs. So come down here to our thing. You know what a tab, you hit the tab button and it bops it over a specific amount. We can do that here too. So to do that, we just use an escape character. It's this slash, and the slash says the thing directly behind this, we need to escape it out and do, it's a special thing, right? So we can get rid of that space. So this /t means a tab. So we can do another one right there, and then another one right there. So let's save this and see how this looks. Hopefully better. Okay, so a little bit better, but some of these email addresses are kind of long. So let's put 2 tabs for the 0, 1, 2, the ages. So that would be 0, 1, 2 right here. So let's just put another tab. Save this and run it. See how that looks. Not great. Some of these longer emails are throwing us off here. Well, just for the sake of formatting, what I'm going to do is pull up our workbench. Where did that go? And I'm just going to change Steve's email from Steve email to Steve. Now, obviously, in real life, this is not something you would do, but this is our world, and we can do whatever we want. Tina. All right, so enter. Down here, click apply, finish. All right, let's run this thing again and see what happens. All right, looking good there. So this is getting better, but we still would like some headers, right? Because we can tell what this stuff is, but like, what are these? Is this age? We don't know. I mean, we know because we created it, but you know, somebody reading this wouldn't necessarily know what that is. So let's fix that real quick. So here, what we want to do is outside of the loop, above the loop, let's just print out some, oops, there we go, some header stuff. So let's see, the first column is name, and then we want a tab, and then the next column is email, I think, right? And then a tab, and after the email, we want 2 tabs, right? I think, yeah. And then age, tab, and then ID. So if we save this, let's see how this looks. You just sort of have to play around with this, get it to look the way you want. Name, email, oh, the age needs one more tab. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, oh, that's pretty good. We can also then just sort of let's do some lines, right? 1, 2, 4. Let's do let's see what that looks like. T, and then EMAIL, T, and then AGE, T, ID, let's go 3. Just in case the IDs get big in the future. So let's clear the screen and try it one more time. I don't care for that. Let's do regular dashes instead. I did underscores to try to get fancy. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Save this. Run it one more time. Clear the screen first. Okay, it's starting to look pretty good, right? So it's just basic text formatting, and this isn't really a SQL thing. It's more just a Python. We're just kind of playing around because this is fun to me. But you could format these things any way you wanted. You know, since we're printing this stuff out in the terminal, it's not going to be real fancy at this point. You know, you could output this data to a Matlab graph or something. You know, you can get fancy and do graphical stuff with Python. We're not really going to get into that in this video. This is more of a nuts and bolts how to actually work with MySQL and get data out, put data in, update data, do that sort of thing. This is just sort of a fun little thing we're going to do. So I think that's all for this video. In the next video, what are we going to do? Let me pull up my handy dandy notes. Ooh, the next video is the where command. That's a fun one. All right, so that'll be in the next video. Okay, in this video, I want to talk about the where clause. And the where clause is a SQL command, a SQL clause that allows us to search for specific information. So in the last video or a couple of videos ago, we searched for name, right? And we just pulled everything from name. Well, that's fine, but you likely want to get more specific. You want all the names where the first letter is J or something. That's a bad example. Let's say age. Maybe you want all the ages where the age is over 30 or the age is under 20. Or you might want all the users where they live in New York. That's the where clause. So usually when you're searching, you're going to use the where clause, and there's some variations on it we'll look at in the next couple of videos. But the where clause is the main sort of workhorse search thing that you're going to use. So it's pretty simple. We can just create my cursor, like always, and then .execute, as always. And let's just create our select statement. Here we go, select. And we still want everything, select everybody from users. And to use the where clause, we just type in where, and then some condition. So we might say where age is greater than 30, right? And these are conditional statements, greater than, less than, equal to. Those sorts of things will work there. And an or will also work there. We'll talk about that in the next couple of videos. So pretty simple. Now we just need to put this into a result as we always do. So let's go my cursor dot fetch all. And then let's just print this out. So let's go, let's see, for row and result. Let's just print row. So let's save this where age is greater than 30. Come back here and run our program. And we get John, Tim, and Steve, who is 40, 32, and 55 years old. And if we pull up our workbench here, we can just sort of eyeball this and see, John is 40, Tim is 32, Mary is 21, that's less than 30, so she's not in there. Tina is 29, that's less than 30, so she's not in there. Likewise, we could just kind of play around with this a little bit and go where age is less than 30. Save this and run it. We're going to get those other two, Mary and Tina, who are 21 and 29 years old. So pretty cool. If you know a specific thing, you can do where age equals, in this case, 55. Let's go. We pull this up and run it. Steve. And like always, we can do our little, a little trick here to put the 0th item if we want. Run this again and just get Steve. So very cool, pretty simple. And like I said, there are variations. that you can do, and we're going to look at some of those in the next couple of videos. But here is an integer. Integers are easy because they're greater than, less than, or equal to, right? You could do greater than or equal to, greater than and equal to, greater than or equal to, like that, or less than or equal to, like that. But what about strings? Well, we can go where name equals, and then we need to put single quotes with whatever we're searching for. So let's go John. We know that's in there. Save that. And boom, we get John. Likewise, we can take away our little brackets here and run this again and get the whole record. John Codemy, 40 years old. So pretty cool, pretty simple. And I think that's all for the where statement. In the next video, I want to talk about like and some wildcard characters so that we can search things without knowing specifically what we're searching for using wildcards. So that'll be in the next video. Okay, in this video, I want to talk about wildcards and like. So in the last video, we did this where name equals John, and that's fine if we know specifically that there's a John, right? But you likely, when you're searching for something, you might not know exactly what's there. You may have some sort of idea. So we might want to search for like names that start with J or something. So how would we do that? Well, first, instead of using the equal to sign, we use like. So if we run this, we're going to get the same thing we did last time. We're going to get this John record here, right? But let's say we just want names that start with J. So if we save this and run it, we're not going to get anything because we need to use a wildcard. We need to say names that are like J, but then also have stuff behind them. And to do that, we've already sort of looked at wildcards in the past when we looked at our sort of placeholders. Remember we did that %s earlier. Same thing here, we just don't need an S now. We just use the % sign. So if we save this and run it, we get, again, John. So very cool. We could go TI, names that start with TI, right? So let's save this and run it. And we get Tim and Tina, both start with a T and an I. So let's pull up our workbench really quick and just kind of look through here. Are there any other weird things we might want to look for? Well, let's see. There's E's and there's A's. Let's look for names that have an I in the middle somewhere. How would we do that? Well, take a look at this. We've got this wildcard here at the end, and the wildcard means search from here on, right? So TI and then anything after that. That's what the wildcard means. So we could do the same thing at the beginning. We could go, we want wildcard stuff in the beginning, has an I somewhere in the middle, and then something else after, right? So we put 2 wildcards in there. If we save this and run it, we should get the same Tim and Tina, I hope. Tim and Tina, very cool. So play around with these wildcards. They're very interesting. They're very useful, especially if you sort of get the hang of them. At the beginning, it's a little weird. There's, having them at the beginning versus at the end, but it's pretty simple and straightforward, I think. So that is wildcards. That is equal to, greater than, less than, like, those sort of things. Very interesting. Now, in the next video, we're going to look at and or. So basically what we're doing here is doing one statement. And you could sort of string these together with ands and ors, and we'll look at that in the next video. Okay, in this video, I want to talk about and or. So up until now, we've been just basically running one sort of big SQL statement and searching for one thing, but you can search for many different things all at once. And that's often pretty useful to do, and you're always going to want to do things like this. So to do that, we just use and or. And or are useful, but very different. We'll talk about those in this video. So to do and, we could just use our same exact select statement here, but just at the end here, actually inside of the quotation marks still, we just type in and. So we could say we want to select all the users whose name has an I in the middle and their age equals 29, right? So if we save this and run it, we get Tina. So if we eyeball our workbench here, we can see the only age here, before it was Tim and Tina were the 2 things that it was returning, but Tim is 32, not 29, so he didn't get returned in this one. And the important thing to know about and is all of the conditions in this statement have to be true in order for this to return anything. So, there has to be a name with an I in it and an age. If there's only a name with an I in it and not an age, it won't return anything. So for instance, if we go, an age 100, if we run this, we're not going to get anything because there's no records that has an I in it and has the age 100. Both of the things have to be true in order to return something. We can do or, and or is the opposite. It will return one or the other. So only one of those have to be true. So either they have to have an I in the name or they have to be age 100. So if we run this, we're going to get two results, Tim and Tina, because they both have I's in their names. Now, neither one of these are 100 years old, but it doesn't matter because we used or. And in or, only one has to be true, one or the other. So pretty simple to keep straight, but it's just a basic sort of logic thing, and or. And if you're familiar with Python and other programming languages, you see and or logic all the time. So you're probably already familiar with this concept of and or, and or. So that's very cool. So that's really all there is to that. You just keep slapping things on our select statement here, and you can add more. You can go and age equals 29 and ID equals, what is Tina's ID? Let's pull this up and look. Tina's ID is 5, right? Or her user ID. I should change that. User underscore ID equals 5. So if we save this and run it, we lost our quotation mark accidentally. There we go. I'm always doing things like that. Boom, we get Tina. So, you can keep stringing these on. You can string ands and ors together, though I don't think you would really want to. No, probably not. But, whatever you want, however you want to do it, you have a whole lot of flexibility with this. So I think that's all for this video. In the next video, we're going to look at updating records. Okay, in this video, I want to talk about updating records. And we've already kind of played around with this. Pull up the workbench. Just in here, sort of manually updating things. You just click on the thing, update it, come down here and click apply, and you're good to go. Of course, that's no good for us. We want to learn how to do that with actual SQL, right? That's the point of this course. So how do we do that? Well, it's pretty straightforward. So let's just create some my SQL stuff and set this equal to. Now let's just create a query here. Let's go update and then our table, users, and we want to set something. What do we want to do? Well, let's update an age. Let's update my age. Let's say I just had a birthday. So we want to go age equals 41. Now we use our where clause, where name equals John. Oops, capital John, right? So that's good. Now we need to actually execute this thing. We do that using our cursor as always, my cursor.execute. And then we just pass in this my underscore SQL that we just created. Now, like at the beginning when we created our table and added stuff to the table, we need to commit this change. So we can run this and it'll do it, but it won't save the change. We actually have to commit it. And we've done this before, so we just go mydb.commit and then that. And remember the mydb, that is the name of our SQL connection here, mydb, from way back when, right? So if we save this, come back over here and run this guy, nothing happens on the screen. We didn't tell it to print out anything. But if we pull up our database here and refresh this with a little lightning bolt here, we see, in fact, yes, John is 41. Now, that works. Obviously, we just did it. But what happens if we have another record of some other John? John at other.com. And John is, 12 years old, and his user ID is, we can just leave that blank. Come down here and apply, finish. You see that it auto-incremented the ID for us, of course. So now if we run this thing again, let's change the name or let's change the age from 41. Let's change it back to 40. I didn't actually have a birthday. What's going on here? That's an error. Let's fix that. So let's run this thing again, change it to 40. Our name is John. Pull this up and run it. Nothing happens, but let's check our workbench, refresh. Yep, here's my name, John, I'm 40, but this John down here is now 42, and he was like 12 before, and we just can't have that. So first off, I'm going to change that. Well, no, let's not change it. Let's leave it the way it was. Right? So this is a problem, and that's why you don't usually want to update records using non-unique columns or whatever, or fields or whatever. And so instead of name, you're going to want to use user ID. And that's why, one of the big reasons why we have this user ID column and why it's the primary key, remember. Primary key means they're all unique. Every record, every person in the database has their unique ID. So there's only one person with ID of 1. There's only one person with an ID of 6. Even though they're both named John, we can keep them separate with the user ID. So let's go ahead and change this new John back to 12 years old. His ID is 6. So where user ID equals, and this is not a string, it's a number, so we don't put quotation marks. And let's change this back to, let's make him 16. Let's let him drive. We're not heartless. Kid should be able to drive. There we go. So run that. Let's pull back our workbench again. And boom, now he's 16. So pretty simple updating records. You just use this update query command. This is a SQL command where, then you put your table name, or as users. We want to set age. And likewise, you can do anything. You could set the name to, maybe this was Johnny instead of John, right? So if we save this and run it, just be sure to put single quotation marks in here, not double, because the doubles go on the outside, right? So if you put them here, it's just going to mess everything up. You see we get this big red bar going, oh, what are you doing? So let's come back here to our workbench, refresh this, see if John is now Johnny, and he is. And that's how that works. So yeah, pretty cool. In the next video, I think we'll talk about returning results with specific limits. So, sometimes there's thousands of results. You might only want the top 10 or something. How do we do that? We'll look at that in the next video. Okay, in this video, I want to talk about limiting results and ordering results. So we already know how to get things, how to pull specific data out of our database, but we don't know how to limit those results. So let's do that in this video very quickly. So let's pull up my cursor, like always, .execute, and let's create a select statement. Select everything from our users table. Now let's say we just want the top 3 records, right? We could do that by go limit 3. Just that simple, right? Let's see. Now we want a result equals my cursor dot fetch all, as always. Oops. And then we can just do a quick loop for row in result print row. Okay, so let's just save this and run it and see what we got here. Clear the screen. So John, Tim, and Mary. And these are just in the order that they've been entered into the database, or into the table. So you can see here, refresh this to make sure this is current. The first 3 records we have is John, Tim, and Mary. And so John, Tim, and Mary are the first ones that come up. Now, you might want the first 3, but not the first 1, right? So you might want Tim, Mary, and Steve. You might want to skip the first one for some reason. How do we do that? Well, that's very, very simple. We just limit 3, but offset 1. So we're saying skip the first one and then give us the next 3, right? So let's run this. Tim, Mary, Steve. Tim, Mary, and Steve. We skipped John. So very cool and very, very simple. As most things with this seemed to be. So, okay, so let's say we can limit things, but now let's arrange them. Let's order them. So let's select all from users, and let's just print this out real quick. So John, Tim, Mary, and Steve. Now we can, this is sort of, I guess this would be ascending order by default. Ascending meaning the first one entered, then the second one entered, then the third one, fourth one, and so on and so on. We can change this to descending. So instead, if we want Johnny to be the first one listed, and then Tina, and then Steve, and then John to be the last one, we can do that. It's pretty simple to do that. We just go order by and then name. And then what do we want? Descending, right? So there's ascending, A-S-C, I think that's right. And then descending, D-E-S-C. So let's save this and run it. See if I've remembered to do this correctly. I don't do this often. No, Tina. Oh, this is doing alphabetical order, looks like. Tina, Tim, Steve, Mary. So descending alphabetical order. Let's try ascending. This will be alphabetical order, I suppose. Yeah, so H-I-J-K-L-M-N-O-P-Q-R-S-T. Yeah, so now we're in ascending alphabetical order. Very interesting. So, I mean, you could play around with this. We can go age. If we want to have them ordered by age in ascending order, so that would be the lowest age to highest age, I guess. So Johnny gets to go first here, I believe. Yep, Johnny, 16, 21, 29, 32. Likewise, we could go the opposite, descending. And we have one in there that was like 55 years old. Let's clear the screen here. Yeah, 55, Steve, 40, 32, 29, 21, 16. So descending order. So yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, that's really all there is to it. This stuff is pretty straightforward once you just memorize these few basic SQL commands as we're seeing. So I think that's all for this video. In the next video, we'll look at deleting entries, deleting records and rows and things like that. That'll be in the next video. Okay, in this video, I want to show you how to delete records. So deleting records is pretty straightforward. So we just create another MySQL little statement here. And it's pretty straightforward. We just want to delete and then from, and then name your table, users, where, and then we just give this a condition, just like any other where clause. So we could say where name equals or something like that, but let's go user ID equals 6. Is that Johnny? Oh, poor Johnny. He wasn't here very long. User ID equals 6. Right? So just like before, we need to do our myCursor.execute and then pass in this MySQL thing we just created. And we're making a change to our table, a permanent change, so we need to commit the change, just like we have in the past. So it's mydb.commit and then that. So let's go ahead and save this and run it. It won't return anything because we didn't tell it to, but if we pull up our workbench and refresh, poor Johnny has disappeared, gone forever. Now here's something interesting. We can add a new, remember Johnny's user ID was 6, right? So we can put Tracy, no@no.com. Tracy is 19, and if we apply this, we can see her user ID is now 7, even though it goes from 4, 5, boom, 7. Now we can manually change this back if we want, but since it's auto incrementing, it knows the next one is 7, even though the 6 is no longer with us. Just kind of a quirky thing. I just thought I'd sort of let you know about that so you don't freak out if you ever see that. No big deal. So let's look at this one more time here. Now again, we could do things like, where name equals John or whatever, but I think we already learned that that's not a good idea because there may be lots of different records with the name of John, and if you run this command, it'll delete all of them, and that might not necessarily be what you want to do. So you always want to sort of delete a unique field, right? The user ID, the primary key, whenever you're deleting things, because that's just the just the smart thing to do. So that's all for this video. Deleting entries, pretty simple. In the next video, I'll show you how to delete an entire table. That's fun stuff. So that'll be the next video. Okay, in this video, I want to show you how to delete tables, but also how to back them up, export them, and import them. I think the two go hand in hand. So before we delete our table, we're going to save it to make sure we have a copy in case we want it for later. In our case, we don't really care. There's only a few records in it, but still. So let's open up our workbench. And before we delete this thing, let me show you real quickly how to import and export tables. So we just come down here to our schema section and find our table that we want and right click. Now you can drop table. This will delete the table. We're not going to do that here because we're going to do this in Python. But when you delete a table in SQL terms, it's called dropping the table, right? It's just the way it has always been. But that's not what we want here. We want to go to Table Data Export Wizard. We want to make a backup copy of this before we delete it, right? So click that, and we get this screen here, and it says which of the columns do you want to keep? We want to keep them all, so they're all checked, and you can offset if you want. Then it says where do you want to save this? And I'm just going to save this to my desktop in a file called users because it's a users table. That makes sense to me. And you could save it as a CSV file or a JSON file. CSV stands for comma separated values, I think, or something like that. And JSON is JavaScript object notation. If you want it in JSON, that's really kind of useful. We're just going to leave it CSV for now. No big deal. And okay, click next. We're good to go. Boom, boom. And we're done. Finish. So I can confirm by checking my desktop on my other monitor that in fact the user's file is there. You can't see it, but trust me, it's there. So we've got it. So now let's learn how to delete the table from Python. So just like before, we're going to create a, let's give this a comment, delete drop table. Okay, so we want to create some MySQL stuff and set this equal to the SQL command of drop table users, right? So we're dropping a table. Which table? Users table. And just like before, we just go my underscore cursor dot execute and then just pass in this MySQL thing. And that should do it. So let's save this. We don't really need to commit this because it's going to do it for us. So Python database.py, nothing returned. We don't expect it to. But now come back to our workbench and head over to our schemas and just refresh this. And boom, our testDB database is still there, but there aren't any tables, right? Whoops. So if we refresh this, well, actually, this shouldn't work at all either. We're getting errors down here. So yeah, it's gone, right? So we've saved a copy so we can import this. So I'm just going to hover over the tables thing and let's see. Table data import wizard. And just pull this over and we just need to find the file that we just saved. We called it users.csv. Open that, click next. Create new table. Yep, we want to do that. We don't want to import this into a current table because we don't have any tables. We deleted our table. And we want to call it users. We'll just leave that as the default. It already knows. And here's our columns. We can see and all the stuff. So we can click next. And then next, boom, boom. That should be it. Finish. And now if we come back to our schema and click refresh, boom, now we have our users table. We can select whatever, and we still have all of our records backed up. So that's cool. Now, one quick thing I want to show you before we go. Let's run this command again. So let's pull up our guy here and run it again. And now let's look at our workbench, refresh this thing to make sure it's gone. It is gone. Now, what if we run this command again? Oh, we're getting all kinds of errors. We can't delete something that's already been deleted, right? So a better way to drop a table, and you could do it this way, it works obviously, but if you want to put in some error handling to make sure that it only deletes tables that exist, you can go drop table if exists, and then name your table users. So if we save this and run it, let's clear the screen, nothing happens. We don't get all those angry errors, even though we just tried to delete a table that doesn't exist, right? So yeah. Okay. So let me pull up my notes here. I think that's about it. So in the next video, I'll talk about a few conclusion type things. I'll show you where you can get the code for all of this stuff that we've went over, so you can download and keep a copy, sort of a quick reference guide if you want. Sort of useful. So you don't have to memorize all these SQL commands and things. And then we'll, wrap some things up and say a few more things, and that'll be that. So that's in the next video. Okay, so I guess we're pretty much done here. So before we move forward here, I want to give you a chance to download all this code we just did and have it sort of as a quick reference. So if you go to my GitHub account, github.com/flatplanet, there should be a little button down here to follow me if you want to do that. That's cool. But come over here to the repositories button, click on this, and look for this Python MySQL course one. By the time you watch this, this might be further down the list, so you might have to search through here to find it. Or you can just go to flatplanet/Python MySQL course, all capitalized, all with hyphens in between. And you see this database.py file. This is the file we've been working on. And this is it. So you can copy this, paste this, save this, reference it however you want. And you can see it has our comments for each little thing we did. Insert one record, that's this stuff. Insert multiple records, that's this stuff. Where and like, and or, limit results. So it's a really handy little reference that you can look back on, so you don't have to memorize this stuff. Nobody memorizes this stuff right away. You just always sort of reference things like this. So I hope that's useful. So that's the course. We're done. I hope you enjoyed this little intro to MySQL with Python. MySQL is a lot of fun. It's really easy to use, and these days everything needs a database. I mean, websites need databases. If you're doing big data stuff, if you're building some sort of app, you're always going to need a database. MySQL's free, Python's free. The two go together pretty good. So I hope you enjoyed this course. If you did like this course, do me a favor and leave a review at Udemy or wherever you watched it. Those reviews really just make or break courses. A couple of bad reviews and it's all over. A couple of good reviews and it really turns things around and helps the course show up in the search results at Udemy or wherever, which is really cool. So I would appreciate it if you took a couple minutes to do that. If you like this course, head over to my website, codemy.com. This is where I have all my courses, and there's like 30 courses right now. If you like this SQL course, I've got other SQL courses you can check out. Microsoft SQL, I'm building a Postgres SQL course next, all kinds of stuff. We've got Python courses, there's that SQL course. We've got Ruby courses, we've got Django, Ruby on Rails, some really cool cryptocurrency stuff. There's PHP, Ubuntu Linux, JavaScript, HTML, WordPress, even like SEO and email marketing. So, we're computer people, we build stuff. You still have to kind of market those things when you build them. If you build a website, you still have to market it to get people to come to it. So we got the SEO and the email marketing course, pretty cool. Let's look through here. Anything else that's kind of cool jumps out, JavaScript. And I have basically two sets of courses. We have like programming language courses that teach like Python, Ruby, PHP, HTML, CSS, whatever other programming languages. Then we also have like project courses where we build cool projects. Like here, we build a cryptocurrency portfolio app with Ruby on Rails. We do the same thing with Django up here. Build a copy of the website Pinterest with Ruby on Rails. Just all kinds of cool stuff, and it's really cool. Let's see, normally it costs for total membership, which is all my courses, all my future courses, one-time fee, it's $49, which is pretty good. I mean, there's hundreds of videos, and it's really cool. But just sort of as a thank you for watching this video, if you come over here to the checkout and type in supercoder as the discount code, which I know it's a stupid code, but I can't get around to ever updating it. It'll knock another 22 bucks off. So you pay just $27 for all of my courses. Basically, I have to charge something just to cover bandwidth for all the videos because there's a lot of bandwidth involved in watching all these videos. So 27 bucks. I mean, that's cheaper than a large pizza these days. So I think it's a pretty good deal. Like I said, you get access to all my courses, all my future courses. I'm adding new courses every week or two, it seems like. Whenever I do, you get those for free. They just pop up automatically. No future charges, one-time fee. Pretty cool. You get access to me. You can ask me questions. You can access other students. You can discuss things with them. It's a pretty cool little community, I guess. If you like watching my courses on Udemy, head over to johnelder.org/Udemy. And this lists all my courses. They're the same courses as on my Codemy website. They're just on Udemy. So, if you have a bunch of free credits on Udemy or something and you want to take one of my courses there, or if you just prefer that platform to watch courses, this is a cool place to come and see all of my courses. And each of these has a link to a coupon code that gets you a big discount. So I think they're all at $11.99 each or something like that. So it's a lot more expensive than if you just get them all at Codemy for the 27 bucks, but it's still a lot cheaper than taking them individually on Udemy. So that's an option if you're into that sort of thing. You can do that, and that's cool. So anyway, my name is John Elder from Codemy.com. Had a good time teaching this course. Hope you learned a few things. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.